Hey, welcome to Speedify Live Q&A. I'm Alex Giesis, and over this way, we've got Kevin Cunningham, the lead developer of Speedify. So we're here to answer any questions you guys might have about Speedify. In particular, I think we'd also like to hear what you guys would like to see in the near future, right? What ideas do you have to improve Speedify? And I think if you don't have any suggestions, we'll start throwing out some of our ideas and see if any of them excite you guys. So how are you doing today, Kevin?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Got a lot going on. We're starting a minute late because, I don't know, my computer wasn't working. And then I rebooted and it magically worked. So I don't know. Later I'll try to figure out what the problem was, but I don't know. I think it's just computers in the modern day. So hey to everybody, we are live. We are really live. So if you post questions and comments underneath this video, wherever you're watching it, we will see them and we will answer them. All right. All right. We will trigger write our support again. I don't know what happened to you. I see your story. But send an email to support@speedify.com and we'll look into this. I mean, I don't know. Stack Social sells Speedify subscriptions. We'll have to dig into what happened there. All right. So, Kevin, what are you thinking about for the future of Speedify? I know you had some ideas you were batting around.
Yeah, so one area we're starting to look is how Speedify can integrate with a lot of these other streaming tools, things like OBS, or there's all sorts of different platforms that are streaming. How can Speedify better integrate to offer a better experience? Because right now, Speedify obviously does the best it can with your internet connection and everything, but if it could give feedback to some of these apps or get input from some of the streaming apps about what speeds they're trying to do, that type of stuff, it could be definitely useful for providing a better experience for the people that are trying to stream, and being able to see what Speedify is doing as you're streaming, instead of having to switch to another window. We're looking at ways to integrate them and come up with better ways to display information and things like that.
Yeah. So one thing that I know a couple of people have been asking for is the ability to sort of see what's going on in the Speedify on their other computer, right? So if you're live streaming from an iPhone, you can't really look at the Speedify user interface because you're in the middle of video. But maybe someone else somewhere else could have up a web browser where they're watching your internet connections. So that comes up a lot. We're kind of thinking about how to do that, right? There's my.speedify.com, which might be the place you'd log in to see all your computers and phones graphs. Oh, this is interesting. Will there be a way in the future to apply the VPN for only specific selected apps on Android? I know there's a way to do the WireGuard app, for example, and other competing VPNs that use it. Kevin?
Yes, we have a little bit of this functionality right now. We by default include all of the traffic into the VPN, and we allow you to bypass some certain selected apps. But there's a possibility we could open that up in the future, that there's ways to only include certain apps to the VPN or give you more control about which apps are bypassed. So we may in the future open up the more controls for doing that. Right now, we just kind of have pre-selected list of things like Netflix and Hulu that typically block us on the Android app, that we allow those apps to go around the VPN. But yeah, it's certainly a possibility, something we could consider for the future. We hear from some people that they just want their important live streaming traffic maybe to go through Speedify, and everything else can just go out the normal internet connection. So it's something we're considering.
So the reason it didn't get done yet, and this may sound dumb to you as an Android user, is that it's impossible to do on iOS. And we like doing, our iOS and our Android apps are like the same. And iOS, Apple says it is none of our business which app it is. And that only VPNs that companies put on their employees' devices should be able to decide which apps go through it and which don't. And of course, that's not what we're doing. We're just in the App Store. So that's kind of thing that we realize Android users would appreciate it, but in general, we've been trying to be consistent, and it's tough. All right. First of all, great system. Running it on a Pi headless. Looking for a browser interface. Wow, you're already addressing this right now. Okay, so that is a vote for the browser interface.
I guess there's two possible ways I could see that. For somebody running a Pi headless, they may just want to be able to see it remotely on the same network, versus there's other people that may just want to be remotely out of the internet seeing stuff and controlling. And there's two different things there, maybe, where somebody remotely just might want to see stats, where somebody on the same network might want to actually control and disconnect and connect Speedify and stuff like that. We've always kind of shied away from that in the past, because we don't want to expose that somebody else maliciously on the same network could be controlling your Speedify and forcing you to disconnect your VPN, that type of stuff. But we could have options.
That's all sorts of security, right? Now you
Yeah.
need a login to get into this thing. Yeah. So,
But yeah, definitely have something that you can see how Speedify is doing remotely. That's definitely something.
do you just want to see how it's doing, or do you need the whole user interface? Do you think you're changing settings and stuff too, Wolfgang? Just curious. What do you think about that? As I said, we're live, so if you want to just post questions and stuff underneath, we are here for you. Yeah, Trickert, really reach out to support. I really feel bad about your story. We'll figure it out. But yeah, it gets so tricky, right? I mean, when you have Stack Social or Apple or Google selling our stuff, which is kind of the way you have to do it these days. We're sometimes told so little from the stores that we can't verify people's purchases, right? You say you bought, and if Apple, I don't know. But we'll dig into it for you. Thanks for answering. I am using VNC at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I use VNC actually to connect to my Raspberry Pi to check its user interface remotely. So there you are. And there's the email for people who want to email support. We're here for you. So what else?
Yeah, so you were playing around, Alex, with having Speedify interface showing up in OBS itself, so you could kind of watch the Speedify interface while your stream's going on and be able to maybe control things.
Yeah, and I certainly. OBS now has what are they called? Browser docs. If you're using the latest version of OBS, and you can just add panels either into the video or into the controls that you see around the video while you're streaming. And if you plunk the right URL in there, and I think probably in a few weeks when we make a few adjustments to make it work better, we'll publish what that URL is. You can actually get the Speedify user interface to show up in OBS. And yeah, if you make it as part of the controls, it works, right? So you can turn on and off Speedify from inside OBS. And there are JavaScript APIs that OBS makes available to us to talk back and forth to OBS. Like, are we streaming right now? Are we starting to stream? Did the stream end? Or are we, things like that. So I think we're going to do some cool things.
Yeah, I think we could have probably a slimmed down version of the user interface that shows just some of the interesting things you'd want to see and gives you a little more control there.
You were found. Planning any updated tutorials for IRL streaming? Yes, I heard people talking today about making Alex do some more tutorials for IRL streaming. They haven't said anything to me.
For the users,
around here.
Yeah, so the question for the users: is there anything particular that you'd want to see a tutorial about?
Which apps, which devices do you think you would use? What would you stream to? What would you like to see in the streaming tutorials to make sure we cover it? Yeah, we did the ones about using the Raspberry Pi for video encoding and stuff. And I kind of feel like that was a failure. The Raspberry Pi actually isn't quite powerful enough to do the video encoding. It's powerful enough to do bonding and handle hundreds of megabits, but you have to give it the video already encoded. So I think we should do a different version of some of those videos and tutorials.
Yeah.
All right, Rob says, I primarily use Speedify for the channel bonding. Can you all go into any detail about how the streaming mode works in particular? How does it operate with non-streaming traffic?
Yeah. So, yeah, if you look, in Speedify, there's different modes. There's streaming mode, speed mode, and redundant mode. So speed mode was our previous default, and that's where we're trying to do all the channel bonding and get the most speed out of it. And streaming mode is largely almost the same as speed mode. So to answer your question, if there's no streaming traffic at the time, it behaves exactly the same as you would in speed mode. But what it's doing special is it's watching the traffic and looking for anything that looks like real-time audio or video traffic. And we have different rules for doing this, looking at, particular domains or ports that are commonly used for streaming, looking for kind of fixed rate traffic that looks like an audio or video call. And when we see something like this, then we go into this, we just take just that traffic that we've detected and we do some special handling with it. And it actually will be able to dynamically switch you between speed and redundant mode for that traffic, in addition to giving it extra priority. So when we detect the streaming traffic, we'll deliver it ahead of any of the other traffic that's coming in. So if your Windows update starts downloading updates in the background, we'll deliver the streaming traffic ahead of that and send it out to the internet first to make sure that your stream gets enough bandwidth. And then, looking at the performance of your connections that you have, if your primary connections start looking like they're getting a lot of loss or latency, that they're going to be unreliable, we might switch you into redundant mode for that streaming traffic so that it's sent across multiple connections and tries to smooth out the experience and get it through the most reliably. So we have a bunch of different protections in there to try and make sure that your stream goes well and make sure that it gets through.
So this is my live Speedify off this Mac right now. I have, Ethernet and actually the Wi-Fi are both going to the same Comcast cable modem. So it's, doesn't give that much protection there. If I kick out the Ethernet cable, it'll switch to Wi-Fi. But if Comcast goes out, both go out. And the cellular, though, it is a tethered iPhone. And then down here underneath, you can see the streams, and you can actually see it recognizes that I'm on Restream. I think that the reason there are two streams is one is the video from Kevin coming into me, and then the other is the video from me going out. But hey, look at that. It's saved me from excessive latency or packet loss twice during this call already. This might not have been something that would have knocked me off online, but it's some sort of glitch that Speedify protected me from. So that is super cool. All right. Questions keep coming in. All right. Back to what they'd like to see tutorials on. Software related to using Raspberry Pi as a hub for multiple connections with Speedify. Yep. So we've got some instructions online. If you go to support.speedify.com, look under Linux. There's some articles about setting up the Raspberry Pi and setting it up as either a Wi-Fi or Ethernet router. But I think some friendly videos are probably a good idea. All right. Is there a way to use like 4 SIM cards using an Android phone and Speedify Android version?
That gets tricky, getting that many connections to an Android phone. So 4 SIM cards and Android phone. So I'm not clear if they're talking about using 4 SIM cards on an Android phone or they want to tether a phone. You could certainly, the easier way to do that would be if you had some sort of device, like a Raspberry Pi, or you could do a Windows computer or whatever, some sort of Linux computer, and you had a way to connect these different SIM cards, tethering multiple devices, or if you had USB modems, a way to tether them all in, then you could use them that way. But trying to get 4 actual SIM cards on an Android phone, it's difficult, if not, I don't know if that's even possible.
It's just physically hard. Our software is ready to handle 31 internet connections. I don't know that anyone's legitimately had higher than 12 unless they were just trying to see if our software could handle it. And usually people are pretty darn happy if they manage to get 3 connections going. All right, here's another request for a tutorial. Would love to see tutorials on how to adjust settings for optimal performance during low connections or throttling. Yeah. Yeah, that was another question about, depending on streaming apps. With OBS, it looks like we can kind of kick it potentially. We don't have the code today. I was talking to some of the developers, actually Ben Terrell, who I had as a guest a couple of weeks ago. Two of us were brainstorming, and it seems like Speedify could kick OBS and say, "Whoa, the internet's not that fast, buddy. Drop the bit rate, drop the bit rate." And then when the internet gets faster, we can go into OBS and say, "Okay, it's cool. You can go up to 7 megabits now," and that you'd get, the exact quality that you can actually handle. Is Speedify a progressive web app? One day I noticed Control F5 refreshes the app just like hard refresh in a browser. Kevin?
Yes, yeah. So yeah, the Speedify user interface is it's an older framework, but yes, it is JavaScript and HTML, and that's how we display it across the different platforms. They all have some sort of web view component for displaying the user interface.
Yeah, so there's kind of the Chrome around the outside is native code, and then we've got a web browser in the middle, depending on the platform. Safari on iOS or Mac OS. It's the new, what is it called? Chrome forked by Microsoft on Windows, and what else? On Linux, it's actually Chrome embedded in it. So, all right. Do phone calls on a cell phone, when it can switch between cellular and Wi-Fi calling, count as streaming traffic?
I think for the most part, a lot of that goes around the VPN. We don't ever see it. So yeah, that's not handled by us from what I can see.
Yeah, so I was going to say, phone calls don't magically go around us. I mean, if it's from an app that's not built into the phone, then it does go through us. If you're using, I was going to say Skype, but I don't think it exists anymore. But Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever to make a phone call, then yes, it goes through us, and yes, we should recognize it as a call. But the actual built-in call app in Android and iOS, both, by design of the operating system, not of us, we can't touch them. All right. Also, last question. Doesn't have to be your last question. Will there be support in the future for other Linux distributions apart from Ubuntu based?
Yeah. So, well, to clarify, we support anything that's Debian based, which is a larger umbrella than just Ubuntu based.
One up the tree.
Yeah. But yeah, it's possible that we could support other ones. So the core of Speedify should work on pretty much any Linux. A lot of what's Debian specific is kind of our wrappers around it to install it. And provide the deb file and some of the scripts and stuff for setting up the sharing and that type of stuff is set up for Debian based stuff. But I mean, technically, if somebody wanted to run it, they could pull out the Speedify binary out of the deb file, and you could run it on just about any Linux, and you just wouldn't get some of our nice added features to it. But the core of it that bonds your connections and runs the VPN and does all that, you could run it with the CLI on any version of Linux, pretty much. With some exceptions, trying to stick it on something like OpenWRT that has different C libraries that it uses. Sometimes
I have to say that is the number one requested other operating system, though.
Yeah.
That's the one people most want to see that we don't support today. All right. iOS USB tethering seems broken in the latest version. Is there a chance to get it back? Which operating system are you trying to tether to? You're trying to tether to the Mac?
Yeah, if it's Linux, I know there's been some.
Or are you actually trying to tether USB devices to iOS? I sort of doubt it, though it's possible.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I know there have been some issues on like the Raspberry Pi tethering iOS devices where people run into issues, but that's not an issue with us as far as that's something in Linux and the extra packages they use people provide for tethering iOS devices. So it's not something we control.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. it is broken, or it was 2 months ago. Perhaps it's been fixed now. Just in like Raspberry Pi OS, you can't tether an iPhone. Not with Speedify, not without Speedify. So I'm hoping that gets fixed. I should go check on it. With Ricochet asks, with the Raspberry Pi for Speedify, is there a way to use the Ethernet port as an input from a video encoder? How does the networking work? Sure. Underneath are instructions for Linux. There are first instructions on how to install in the Raspberry Pi, and then there are instructions on how to share your internet over Ethernet. There's an article with a name remarkably close to that, sharing over Ethernet, in the Linux section. And Speedify on the Raspberry Pi comes with a series of scripts. You just have to change a few things, say share over ETH0 in the settings. And yeah, any traffic off the video encoder will come in the Ethernet and then go into the Speedify. And so as long as you have other internet connections besides the Ethernet that Speedify can use to get to the internet, your video encoder will be online.
I think we're at 3:59, Alex. So.
Yeah, okay. I really only stay about 2 more minutes. All right. Out of the OSs which are supported by Speedify, which ones have the best performance when it comes to bonding performance and stability?
I would say that, so the core of Speedify bonding is the same across all platforms. It's the same exact code that runs across all platforms. There's some specific pieces about getting the connections activated and running the VPN that is different across different platforms. In terms of just general stability of running something, I would say some sort of Linux platform. I mean, Windows, you can run into all sorts of weird issues where it wants to install updates on you and things like that when you don't want it to. And so if you just want something stable running, I would say some sort of Linux. But I mean, the phone ones are pretty good as well. You have a lot more flexibility of what connections you can get and things like that on Linux. A lot more things that you can kind of customize versus, a phone, you might be restricted to just Wi-Fi and cellular, or having to hook in some extra adapters to get things. It's more juggling. So I'd say Linux based, but the core of it is the same across all and should be stable and reliable.
All right. By the way, our next stream is tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern, so an hour and a half later than this one was today, about van life for your family, talking about using Speedify to get on the road, bonding while you travel. We'll go for 4 more minutes, and then I'll call an end. Hi, bro. Please add more servers. We got hit hard in Europe. People in Europe this weekend started using VPNs an awful lot. More servers have been added already today. Probably more coming up. So if that's what you're talking about, we're aware. I guess that's what happens when war breaks out, perhaps. Maybe something else. Yeah, okay, so this is a good feature request. The ability to use multiple gateways on the same network. I think that becomes really common under IPv6.
Yeah.
Right, IPv6 and the protocols, they kind of expected that to happen.
Yeah. So yeah, this is something we definitely thought about for a while that we've just never really gotten to. You can fake it. I mean, it's easier on Linux. You can do virtual adapters that each point to different gateways on the same network. So you could have multiple interfaces going over the same physical adapter, and then you can tell Speedify to use the virtual interfaces. We know some people that have done that type of setup. He mentions here on Windows, doing virtual interfaces like that on Windows, I'm not as familiar how. I think you'd need some additional software or something, or some special driver to do that. I don't think they have built-in stuff in Windows, at least not that I'm aware of, for doing the virtual adapters like that. Maybe that's changed, but it could be a lot trickier to do that on Windows.
Oh, this is a good idea Rob has. Rob Cole asks, last question, is it possible to have metered Wi-Fi connections automatically change their priority in the connection list?
Yes.
Yeah, we should probably do, right?
Well, we have a little bit of that with, you can set the monthly and daily limits, and then...
Right. But in Windows itself,
Oh,
If you know that a Wi-Fi connection is really expensive, like perhaps it's actually connected to a satellite dish. In Windows, you can say this is metered, which means
right.
expensive in Windows. It's the equivalent of our secondary. We
Okay, yeah, I
should just
misunderstood the
pick.
question.
I wish other operating systems had that. We should pick that up. We
Yeah.
should say, oh, Windows says this Wi-Fi is super expensive. Treat it as super expensive.
Yeah, I
Um,
forget whether we looked into that and we couldn't figure out how to find that flag from the OS, so we'll have to look at it again. But I remember somebody asking about that in the past, and I don't remember what the outcome was, whether we couldn't figure out how to have Windows tell us that or not. But yeah, we'll look into it again.
Yeah, follow up. For example, Wi-Fi in my truck is limited data, but all the other Wi-Fi connections are unlimited. Yeah, yes. The other thing we've been playing with is just looking at the IP address that the Wi-Fi uses to get to the internet, and if we see that it's a cellular mobile provider, just treat it as expensive instead of asking Windows or whatever. Look on the internet side, right? If we see Verizon Wireless, if we see T-Mobile, if we see, Sky, it doesn't matter, right? There are lists of IP addresses that belong to mobile carriers, and if it's one of them, just assume it's expensive and push it secondary. So I think we may do that. And it is 4:04. I am out of time, folks. So sorry. I would love to stay longer, but it's impossible. So thank you very much for joining us. We're actually going to do this again on Wednesday. For those of you who are following online, today's was sort of improv, but that's great. I'm really glad we got to talk to you guys. So tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern, van life. We'll talk about getting on the road and using Speedify in vehicles and using Speedify while camping and satellite and cellular and all that stuff. So thank you guys, and good night or good morning, good afternoon, based on your time zone. I know we have users all over the world. So thank you.
Thanks, bye.